Agenda item number 3 on our calendar, which is Selectmen announcements and updates. Selectman DeWitt, do you have your usual
I have a
comprehensive
couple,
list?
only a few. I think summertime, things calm down. But this afternoon, there was a groundbreaking ceremony with the Claremont Companies for the new Homewood Suites Hotel, the old Red Cab site on Route 9. And we were well represented by members of the board and the town administrator. It's a significant project in a number of ways. It's been in the pipeline for a long time, and it's really exciting that it's actually now going to be built. And it's also significant because the process for designing the building included developing a tool called a skyplane analysis that is a better way of analyzing and evaluating shadow impacts, and I think we should thank the economic development staff and EDAB and abutting neighbors who were volunteers on the committee for developing this. Maybe it will be something that will also benefit other projects. It's also the first project to be actually spade in the ground. We hope construction following very shortly along Route 9. And the next one will be the Brookline Place project. And on that subject, there will be a neighborhood meeting with representatives from Children's Hospital next Wednesday, a week from Wednesday, July 16th, at 7 p.m. in the Latvian Lutheran Church at 58 Irving Street, which is on High Street Hill. And there'll be a presentation on the Brookline Place architectural plans and the process that will be going forward. And back to this week, this Thursday, there will be a walking tour, a site visit at 8 a.m. at 300 Independence Drive to view the location for the proposed 40B development project at Hancock Village. And also on Thursday afternoon, we'll have our wonderful outdoor farmers market in the Center Street parking lot from 1:30 p.m. until dusk. Fresh, local goodies, fruits, veg, you name it, they got it.
Great. Other Selectmen announcements? I'll just add a quick one of mine. A week ago Friday, I was pleased to attend and congratulate on behalf of this board the graduating members of our new firemen's recruit class, and it was very gratifying to see all these new firefighters all educated and ready to be parts of our community, and along with their families and friends who were in attendance. And we also educated Chief Ford for firefighters for 3 other communities, Dedham I remember, and I can't remember the other 2, but Chelsea, Quincy, that's it, in Dedham. So it was a pleasure and our official welcome to those new firefighters. Moving on, I'd like to move to our miscellaneous calendar. First item is 5A on our agenda, which is the question of approving the minutes of June 24th, 2014. I have a minor edit to it, which I'm going to pass down. Any other edits to propose? So therefore, I'm going to move that we approve the minutes of June 24th, 2014 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Next is item B, which is the question of extending for a 2-year period the emergency medical service contract with Fallon Ambulance. Chief Ford.
Good evening.
Good evening again.
Well, as you know, we utilize Fallon Ambulance as our primary ALS, emergency medical service delivery system. We augment them with our in-service fire companies, staffed for the most part with EMTs. We have a 3-year agreement with Fallon that expired June 30th, but we have at our sole option the ability to extend that for 2 more years. We've had a couple of meetings regarding their performance. Their numbers are sent into the town on a regular basis, and they're reviewed. I look at the working relationship we have with them, how things are going, the training they provide for us. They actually go over and above the contract we have with them as far as offering us training. This year, the EMT requirements for all my men became much more strenuous and very involved. Fallon's picked up the ball on that, and they're really monitoring everything, making sure we get the right training, making sure records are being kept. So they've stepped up to the plate in many areas. So it's my recommendation that at this point in time, we do take advantage of that extension and enter into another 2 years with them.
Okay. Questions? Selectman Daley?
Yeah, I just did have a question, Chief. Is this sort of comparable to the agreements other towns have with their ambulance services?
As far as I know, it is. I do think that they offer us a lot. I haven't looked at other agreements per se. I've talked to some other chiefs, but I think what they do, there's no monetary exchange between us and them. We provide them garage space, so to speak. We have our dispatching, but they are dedicated to us. They do provide us a lot of our medical equipment, our disposable items. They provide additional ambulances at whether Chief Illyria or myself deem it necessary, like the marathon, like the golf event, anything of that nature, they have to provide for us, and they never squabble about it. Right now, we're in the process of being trained for the Narcan and EpiPens on the fire side, and they stepped right up. Okay, we'll come in, we'll take care of it, we'll get you going. And so they've been very good about it. I think we have a good deal with them, and it's worked well.
I'm gonna put a, I'm sorry.
I just noticed that defibrillators were part of the deal. Is that right?
Yes, actually, we
I think
make
that's
out
very
better on.
important to have defibrillators in.
It is, but just to give you another example, and I'm going to be quiet here, they, in the contract, we're to pay them $100 per defibrillator each year, and they never charge us.
Great.
So, again, they seem to go over and above.
Yeah, they're
in
smiling
our
back there, so
contract.
you're there.
Expect a bill.
Yeah.
So, I think you didn't hear that. So, things are going well, and again, I like the working relationship we have, so.
I'm going to put a finer point on Selectman Daley's question and ask, are there any, I'm sure Fallon has contracts with other communities. Are there any communities where there's a fee sharing with the municipality or other compensation paid?
There are some that across the state, communities and Commonwealth.
Why don't you come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and then
Peter
answer.
Rassicot, Senior Vice President with Fallon Ambulance. It's a good question. There are some communities throughout the state that do have revenue sharing. It's not something we've ever ventured into, but there are no communities that we service that we share revenue with. The models that we work in have to make sense financially.
Okay.
Do you want to add?
Just the supplemental piece.
If you'd introduce yourself too, please.
Sure. Patrick Sean Tyler, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Fallon. In those examples, which anybody who wants to do a quick Google search and look those up, you can find them, are examples of ambulance service providers who are non-contracted or non-participating providers with the major health insurances like Blue Cross, maybe Harvard, maybe Tufts, which means they charge a remarkably high rate for the services they provide, whereas Fallon's contracted with everyone. And we do so as a means for, one, we believe it's good corporate citizenship. Two, it suits our business needs with what else we do for the interfacility market. And three, I think it's a conscionable decision, frankly, to try to exchange and do right for the community. In those examples, you may see that. You'll see, again, folks who don't have contracts, and costs are shared with the constituents, whereas the majority of costs aren't shared on our side.
Can you tell us is there a trend towards or away from?
Away, not towards.
Selectman Waschinsky.
I have no doubt that Fallon is doing a great job, but I just want to ask, when was the last time we went out to bid for these kinds of services, and has the market changed since the last time we went out to bid? And the reason I ask is I had the experience of a family member needing an ambulance in another community, not Brookline, and call 911, ambulance comes, and then I get a bill for $2,000, which I passed on to the insurance company. But so the fees for this kind of service are very high. So I'm just wondering if we're selling ourselves short by just having this kind of arrangement.
I think just to speak to that example, I don't know what community and that's, your personal situation, but to Sean's point, where you see these, trades, the opportunity, the licensing, call it what you want, where the community gets paid for the contract, your residents make up that difference. You might see a check coming from the ambulance company on an annual basis, but that $2,000 bill you saw in whatever community, you're not going to see here in Brookline, because Fallon, we're contracted with every major payer, Blue Cross, Tufts, Harvard, you name it. So they dictate what we receive, and it has a positive impact on you, the consumer, because they negotiate a discounted rate.
To supplement that point, I think it's remarkably critical. If you read the Boston Globe, they've done an expose with regards to Medicare rates. Centers for Medicare Services released hospitals, probably physicians, ambulance services, everybody who bills Medicare, this master file, national data for 2012. We dissected the data because I'm a curious individual and I believe in business intelligence, but nonetheless, the point at hand is that we charge Medicare our full private rate for our bills. That's just what the law reads, right? You have to submit your bill. And so if I submit a $2,000 bill, I get paid for Medicare $264. The rest of it is non-collectible. I can't speak to your personal circumstance or situation, but I guarantee you there is no service that we deliver or render in any municipality that we're getting paid $2,000 for a service that we submit. We contract because we get volume. We contract because of our the extent of our relationship with the Boston area. We leverage that. I just want to offer that, but you asked a different question, so I can't answer your question.
Not to beat it to death, but Sean referred to the Medicare example. Medicaid, if as a Medicaid patient, we're going to get $180 for that trip. So, and just to give you additional feedback and information, the average reimbursement that we collect is probably around $600 per patient transport. You do see, I'm not going to guarantee that a Brookline resident will never see a bill with private charges, but that's to get the patient's attention. Give us your insurance information so we can bill, as you had mentioned, the appropriate provider. I hope that answers the question, and you did ask the question. Okay.
Well, I can speak to it that I can't speak to. The present contract was initiated before I came here, so the last time we did any going out for bid at least was prior to that, 2009.
Out of curiosity, I know that there are also there is a backup system in place. For example, if Fallon is not available, there could be other ambulance providers who would respond. Is that correct?
Well, we have 2 dedicated Fallon ambulances out here now. As
Right.
soon as they're tied up, they dispatch an additional backup, and if that gets tied up, they dispatch an additional. But they're also, if you want to speak to the community that you're involved with EMS-wise, if it gets really bad.
Just to answer that question, we provide our own backup. There may be times, as Chief said, we have two dedicated ALS units in town 24/7. And that came about at our last contract extension in 2009. When those units are being utilized for transport or coverage at a scene, we bring in our own dedicated, non-dedicated ALS units as well as BLS units. In a real bad situation, if we can't be there within 6 minutes, we might initiate mutual aid, where we call City of Boston. Or
Okay,
it's
so
predominantly-
you do participate?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. We have to.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
Just one quick question. It's my understanding that you can't do private transports in those 2 ambulances which are dedicated to Brookline. Those are only for emergency response.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And there are times, use Coolidge House as an example. Coolidge House may call 911. Those units would go to Coolidge House. As an example.
So I'm prepared to move that we approve this contract extension, but I will add that, in the next 2 years, I'd like to be sure that a further extension is what the norm is, and that there isn't something that we're missing here. So the next time this comes up, I'd like to do a little bit more due diligence and find out what other communities similar to our own are doing.
Okay.
All right? Everybody in agreement with that approach? So I therefore move that we extend for a 2-year period the emergency medical service contract with Fallon Ambulance. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair also votes aye. Thank you. Thanks for your good
Thank you.
service. Next is the question of accepting a grant in the amount of $40,000 from the Mass Historical Commission in connection with the Fisher Hill Gatehouse project. Hello.
Hello, I'm Greer Hardwick, Preservation Planner for the town of Brookline, and I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Franco. It's a pleasure to see you, and congratulations, Chairman Goldstein. It's nice to see you. I came, I think in March, to request that we could apply for this. It's a Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund grant, and you will hear after me, you'll talk to Ray about the work on the Fisher Hill Gatehouse. Aaron and I, sort of trying to parlay and get as much money and leverage it as much, we separated the window and door part of the gatehouse to apply for this Preservation Projects Fund, and lo and behold, we got it. So we have an extra $40,000 matching, and so I'm coming to you to say whether we can accept it. They need it by Thursday, but it's not. But it's. I mean, they need to. But it's wonderful because it's sort of it's conjunction with. It's coming at the same time that we're doing all the rest of the work, and I think we can work with, we have to bid it separately, but we can probably coordinate it, and so that'll really maximize our funds, and we're thrilled. So we, really get a more finished project than we might have, than we had. So this is just my request to
And
accept
I
it.
do believe this is a relatively large grant coming from MHC.
Yeah, it's
I
at
mean,
$40,000. so I
Bigger,
was
bigger
really-
than most. They
Yeah.
tend to run to $10,000 to $20,000.
So I was thrilled. So it's really great.
It's great.
Add me to the thrilled list. Anybody ever have, anyone else have questions?
No, I just see that one of the requirements is someone has to attend a workshop, is that?
1 to 3 on Thursday afternoon. That's where
Okay.
you'll find
All
me. That's my home away from home sometimes lately.
I move that we accept the grant in the amount of $40,000 from the Mass Historical Commission in connection with the Fisher Hill Gatehouse project. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman
Waschinsky.
Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, Greer.
Great, and I'd like to commend Aaron and Ray for this whole package. It's just been a really great experience and working towards that, so hand it over to them.
Good. Next item also has to do with the Fisher Hill Gatehouse project. It's the question of approving and executing a contract in the amount of $576,647,000 in connection with its repair and comfort station project. Ray?
Yes. Ray Masak, Building Department. We received 5 bids. The low bidder was GTC Construction Management. They did our senior center. And with the architect, they determined them to be the lowest responsible bidder. Now, the bid is several thousand below our estimate of $580,000, and that'll allow us to do the low bid and 2 alternates. The 2 alternates are for some masonry infills, and the other alternate is for doing 100% repointing of the building, which is a good thing.
And the $40,000 grant that we just got was for windows and doors, and that's not duplicative of this, of the scope of work in this contract. if I
That is
understand.
correct. It's completely independent, and we needed that grant to really help us in our budgeting in completing this project.
And do we need to hire another contractor to do the windows and doors?
From what I understand, yes, we'll have to put a new set of design documents together and put it back out to bid.
And do we know if 40,000 is likely to cover the windows and doors?
No, it's a matching.
We have to match it.
No, no.
Another
I think Aaron wants to
40,000.
talk to us.
Good evening, Erin Galantine, Director of Parks. So we worked with Talukian and Talukian, who is our architect for all of the building renovation and construction work at Fisher Hill Reservoir Park. They're the ones that put together the bid documents for us, and we were very careful about how we separated out this piece for the windows and doors. If we had not been awarded this grant, we would not have done any work on the windows and doors, but to put up, kind of black wood infill. So we would not have done any work on the windows and doors. they're separated because of the requirements that MHC has in terms of timing. So they require that you actually accept the grant, and then we put the contracts out to bid. And so we didn't want to delay the work that we needed to do on the stabilization and preservation of the gatehouse and construction of the comfort station, not knowing whether or not we would receive this grant. And so frankly, the timing does work well together, and we're hopeful that the successful bidder on the gatehouse project will be interested in bidding on this as well.
And 40,000 plus the 40,000 match, is that likely to get us all the windows and doors that we need?
It may not. It may not. But we have an approach in terms of kind of starting with the doors in the front of the park and kind of the windows on that side.
Okay. Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I had a question, because I thought the comfort station was supposed to be a separate building, but since they're mentioned in the same contract, is the comfort station actually in this
No,
building?
the comfort station is a separate and independent building, voted on by the design review committee. It is the same contractor that is
Okay.
doing both the preservation work and the new construction.
Was it too difficult to make the comfort station in the gatehouse? Yes.
We worked on it for about 8 months. And when we got a condition survey grant about 1.5 years ago, and we really tried to do a charrette of putting it downstairs, upstairs, and doing that, and it didn't make as much sense in the long run for the sort of care and safety of the building and care and safety of the residents and and maintenance. So it just seemed a better solution to do this. So.
Thank you. Selectman DeWitt.
So I am curious about what the expectation for the long-term use of the gatehouse will be.
We've been working on that, trying to, we got some group of students from the Boston Architectural College to do something, and someone at Newbury College. I think it's still up in the air, and I think it'll be interesting to see how the park is used, and it may be helpful for that. But I think this will really, with the windows in and everything fixed, it will really, I think, help us vision and help the community vision about what this space is. And I think we have entertained and sort of talked with the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum to have some kind of working about some interpretation of the water system of Boston and Brookline and of the covered reservoir across the street, at least for some of it, in terms of interpretation and public education and maybe some exhibit space. But it's still, I think, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think a lot of it is getting the park used, and I think having it fixed, people really seeing the inside and having the windows open and having it really come to life. I think, I hope that we'll have maybe the high school students or have a contest about what really would be best there.
And I do recall, don't I, that there were photographic records taken of the reservoir on the other side?
Yes, and that's one of the things, is we hope that we'll not only be able to tell the story of the Metropolitan Waterworks system as it relates to the Chestnut Hill Reservoir, but also the precursor and preamble of the Brookline Waterworks system, that we have some wonderful pictures and videos from when they were doing the work across.
Because
across
I
the
remember
street there.
seeing it. It was quite a space.
Right, and we have some hanging in the halls, if inviting you all to the Planning and Community Development Office. And hopefully with the new website, and when I can learn how to edit, I'm hoping, I have a whole preservation gallery that I'm hoping to be able to really, we've been sort of holding off doing a lot of stuff till we got the new website, so stay tuned and hold
Great.
on your hats.
Great. Unless there are further questions or comments, I move that we approve the contract in the amount of $576,647 with GTC Construction Management of Haverhill for the gatehouse renovation and comfort station project at the new Fisher Hill Park. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to item E, it's the question of approving a contract amendment, Amendment 5, in the amount of $8,855 at the Lawrence School Classroom Addition Project. Tony?
Good evening, Tony Quigley with the Building Department. This is a contract amendment, as you said, with the contract with Flansburgh in the amount of $8,855 to do certain geotechnical investigation and reporting associated with the classroom addition over on the Newell Road side of the building. And this is needed in order to confirm the assumptions made for the structural design, and otherwise make sure that we know enough about the site in order to properly make sure issues are addressed in the bid documents.
Was this something that was not anticipated by the original contract, or something that was intentionally done separately?
Both. I mean, we had historical data from the last time Lawrence was renovated, which was about 10 years ago or so. And at the time, it was thought that that information would be complete enough for this new addition, but upon closer look at the borings and stuff were taken more towards the park side of the building, and there weren't any that were directly in the parking lot, so it was felt that we ought to take some borings there in that part of the site where the building's exactly gonna be, to be sure that we are doing due diligence.
I see. Thank you. Selectman Waschinsky.
Lawrence went out to bid before, and we went out to bid without this information. And
Well, it's true, the project is out to bid, and this issue came up before the building commission in June, and they approved the work for the architect. So based on that, and in order to keep to the schedule, the work's been completed.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, the summertime is abbreviated meeting schedules for both the Board of Selectmen and School Committee, and we have to keep to the schedule.
Okay, well,
sounds
I
like
move
we're
that we approve retroactively, I suppose, contract amendment number 5 in the amount of $8,855 for work by Flansburgh Associates in connection with the school classroom additions. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky? Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Item F
Thank
is thank you, Tony. The question of awarding a contract for mill and overlay of 8 streets in the amount of $1.3 million with Mario Susi and Sons of Dorchester. Mr. Ditto.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On June 5th, we received bids for the mill and overlay of 8 streets. We received 2 bids, Mario Susi and Sons and D&R General Contracting, and Mario Susi was the low bidder at approximately $1.3 million. Streets that we'll be doing under this contract are Sumner Street from Route 9 to the MBTA Bridge, full length of Beaconsfield Road, Aspinwall Ave, Harvard to St. Paul, the full length of Lancaster Terrace, Reservoir Road from Route 9 to Crafts, the full length of Griggs Road, Gardner Road from Tappan to Welland, and St. Paul Street from Aspinwall to Beacon.
All in need.
They are all in very much need of this
We've been
work.
happy with the work of Susi and Sons in the past.
Yeah, Mario Susi has had our maintenance contract for the last 3 years. And last year, he did the reconstruction of Walnut Street from Cypress to Hyde.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't think any of these, well, Harvard maybe. Is it Harvard Avenue or Harvard Street?
Harvard's,
No, it's.
no, which one are you looking at?
Harvard was across street of something else.
That's Aspinwall Ave, Harvard
Oh,
to St.
right.
Paul.
Okay. I just want to remind you, in the past, we've had some glitches where they start doing wait until the week school starts in September and do the road right outside the school or something like that. So just take a look at those locations and make sure the school-related ones get done earlier rather than later.
Yep, good point.
Any other comments or questions? I move that we award contract number PW 14 2018-33 for mill and overlay of 8 streets in the amount of $1,299,130.74 with Mario Susi and Sons of Dorchester. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And we have another road-related one. Mr. Ditto is going to, I'm sure, address this as well. So it's a question of awarding a contract for fiber reinforced rubberized crack sealing in the amount of $17,813 with Superior Seal Coat. Mr. Ditto.
We received 2 bids for this work, one from Superior Seal Coating and another from Seal Coating Inc. And a little bit of Superior Seal Coat had a bid of $17,800. This is a relatively small contract monetarily, but we're actually going to be doing 20 streets seal coating, and I'm sure you all know, crack sealing. I'm sure you all know this is that black rubbery material that we seal cracks out to keep water from getting into the subbase.
Now, I thought we had some capacity to do this on our own.
Not this work. This contract, seal coating and microsurfacing, the next one up, is beyond our expertise. We do a lot of, Kevin Johnson is doing a lot more work with the sidewalk replacement as well as maintenance of street patching.
Oh, it's the patching that we have the piece of equipment
Yes.
for, of course. Selectman Daley.
Yeah, Peter, I'm always a little concerned when we have just 2 bidders and there's a fairly significant difference
Right.
in the bids. So I assume I think it's your practice when that situation arises to check in with the low bidder and make sure they didn't forget something crucial?
Yeah, actually, this is the contract I had at last time, so we're very comfortable with his work. And actually, we changed the format in this contract a little bit. We used to pay the contractor per gallon of seal coating, and it was very difficult for us to track him accurately, so we revised our bid format to bid it by the street. So he will get paid per street under this contract, and we tried it last year and it worked quite well.
Very good. Thank you. I move that we award and execute contract PW 14-32 for fiber reinforced rubberized crack sealing in the amount of $17,813 to Superior Seal Coat, Inc. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. One more road-related item is the question of awarding and executing a contract for microsurfacing of various streets in the amount of $217,000 to Seal Coating, Inc. Mr. Ditto again.
Okay,
This is the losing bidder on the last contract, right?
Exactly. Seal Coating Inc. is a little bit of $216,588. He actually did this contract last year and the year before, and it involves, under this contract, 18 streets. And it's the process where we, for lack of a better word, we squeegee a thin layer of basically asphalt cement and sand and cement mixture. And it gives a new wearing surface to the street as well as seal coating it. And the price for this was about, I think it was $4.50 a square yard. So you get a lot of roadway resurfacing under this contract. And both this and the crack sealing contract, once they're awarded, I anticipate they'll be in and out in 2 weeks.
Really?
Very quick.
Questions?
I note that this contract and the previous contract the bids were opened several months ago, and it's only
Yes.
coming before us now. Is there a reason for the delay?
We got behind a little bit in our getting these out to bid and getting the paperwork done. But they are a little bit late, but they do go quick.
Well, as long as they get done, that's all that matters.
No further questions. I move that we award and execute contract number PW 14-29 for microsurface of various streets in the amount of $216,588.87 to Seal Coating, Inc. of Braintree. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ditto. Next is item I on our miscellaneous agenda, and this is a question of awarding and executing a contract for the stabilization of historic masonry tombs in the amount of $143,000. Ms. Galantine.
Good evening. Looking to have this contract awarded and executed with CD Masonry Restoration. We worked with North Structures to put together a full assessment of all of the tombs at the old burying ground and construction bid documents. What we're looking to do now is to stabilize, repoint, and waterproof 7 of the tombs that are in the worst condition, and these are actually kind of falling apart. The front face of them is pushing out, and it's currently an unsafe condition that we have barricades up around them and caution tape. So we're eager to move forward with this. We have checked all of the references. This particular contractor is actually completing a tomb stabilization project right now in Templeton, Massachusetts, and we feel really confident that they will do a good job for us.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it, because I've seen the conditions there and been worrying about it.
Agreed.
I think in New Orleans, they resell the tombs and in order to get people to put up the money to fix them up.
Yeah, I noticed it too on Memorial Day, that I know exactly where we're talking about.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I move that we award and execute contract number PW14-34 for the stabilization of historic masonry tombs in the amount of $143,000 with CD Masonry Restoration of Oxford, Mass. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a question of awarding and executing a contract for the servicing of traffic signals and related work in the amount of $40,000 with Dangle Electric. Who's here for this? Mr. Papasturgeon. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, Chairman Goldstein. Alan Boston was detaining me up in the back. He wouldn't. It's his
I
fault.
don't want to have to separate you two.
The contract before you is a annual contract for the surfacing of traffic signals and related work. It's up to the amount of $78,720. And it's being, recommendation is to award to Daigle Electrical Construction Corporation. This is generally for the repair of knockdown signals, any of the work that cannot be done in-house is contracted with these folks.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just had a question about the splitting the contract. You were recommending that $40,000 be awarded now and another $38,700 later when there's money in a accident recovery fund. Are we not doing critical work?
This is an as-needed contract for repairs. We only call them in as we need them. So we felt comfortable that $40,000 initially was a good amount. This is not for the new construction of traffic signals or any of that type of work. It's purely repair work, and it's purely for knockdowns and traffic accident-related work, so.
It's anticipated, not for ones that are currently damaged, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, future
Yes.
damage.
Yes.
This is 40,000. There's a difference in our agenda and in the contract, what do you think? Oh, I see. Oh, okay, I get it. Thank you. All right. That's Selectman Waschinsky.
I noticed that there was only one bid. Are we concerned that we didn't get more than one bid?
I think there was more than one bid on this.
Okay.
We only came forward with the recommended contractor, but I believe there was more than one bidder.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Good. No more questions or comments. I'm going to move that we award and execute contract number PW 15-05 for the servicing of traffic signals and related work in the amount of $40,000 with Dangle Electric Construction. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Item K on our agenda is the question of awarding contract number PW 15-4 for pavement markings in the amount of $78,000 with Highway Safety Systems. Commissioner.
Again, this is an annual contract. This is for the painting and applying of thermoplastic white and yellow reflective traffic lane lines and legends. Generally, we paint all of our, what we call long lines, which are the yellow lines and the white lines on the streets twice a year. We try to paint crosswalks at least once a year. And we do the legends as needed. The legends are the arrows and the bicycle symbols and all that stuff that seems to be proliferating all over town these days. And I will tell you that it's becoming very expensive to keep up with the replacement of that. But that's a subject for a future budget. Because all of this, a lot of those legend markings are put in with thermoplastic initially. Thermoplastic has a much longer life than regular traffic line paint. We can get generally multiple years before we have to go back and reapply that if it's put down in the right circumstances. So this contract is basically for doing the long lines and the crosswalks and legends as needed.
Okay. Further questions, board members? I move that we award contract number PW 15-04 for pavement markings in the amount of $77,918 with Highway Safety Systems. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman
Aye.
DeWitt? Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
And excuse me, I do apologize, Selectman Waschinsky, you were correct. There was only one bidder for the electrical contract, and he has bid work with us in the past and is very responsible.
Okay.
Item L is the question of awarding and executing a contract for Beacon Street and general grounds maintenance in the amount of $207,000. Ms. Galantine again.
Great. The next two items are annual maintenance contracts. This one is for the Beacon Street and General Grounds. It is our largest sort of contractual services maintenance support contract, and we've had that for over 6 years now. And it includes weeding, mulching, mowing, trimming, pruning, watering, leaf removal, seeding, and supports not only work along Beacon Street for 10 months, but also general support throughout our entire parks and open space system.
Okay. And why is this work not done in-house?
When this actually applies to Skyline as well. So when Beacon Street was fully renovated, so you had basically the 3 miles of Beacon Street and the new corridor of significant plantings, the town made a decision to fund the maintenance of caring for that space with contractual services in lieu of taking on new employees, which would mean other costs related to benefits. And so we did an analysis, and the town felt that it was more cost-effective to contract out that service that also applies to Skyline Park.
And when was the last time we've kind of double-checked on that analysis from 10 years ago?
I actually analyze the numbers very regularly and would be very quickly able to say how many hours are going into it and what we're paying per year with contractual service.
So you still think this is the right approach? Then?
I do. I actually think we have a really effective balance between a strong in-house parks and open space team that are incredibly good at what they do. I think the organizational structure is right, and I think that we're able to support that as we need to with a lot of flexibility with the contractual services.
Okay. Questions?
Just to be clear in my own mind, does this include the work you do maintaining school property?
That is a separate contract.
That's a separate contract.
Yep.
Selectman Waschinsky.
I'll just make a statement, and it has nothing to do with this contract, or maybe it does, but just around town, there just seem to be a lot of flowers and flowering shrubs in our islands and traffic circles that are just magnificent.
Stunning.
Just wanna
Excellent.
Yeah, I think
compliment
things,
Thank you.
everything looks good. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that on to the crews.
I'm going to move that we award and execute contract number PW 1502 for Beacon Street and General Grounds and Maintenance in the amount of $206,812.50 to Park Landscape Associates, Inc. of Roslindale. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And I think we've already heard from Ms. Galantine about the next agenda item, which is contract number PW 15 for Skyline Park Maintenance for $46,000 to be awarded to D. Musioli Associates, Inc. of Belmont. And unless there are questions or concerns.
I have a
Selectman Franco?
quick question. This contract does not include maintenance of the AstroTurf field at Skyline Park, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Just, I guess then, I have a follow-up. It's kind of not related, but how are we happy with our AstroTurf at Skyline?
We've received really favorable comments and feedback as it relates to the synthetic turf. We do keep up with the grooming and adding infill as we need to. And yeah, it's been a terrific, really great playable surface.
And has it added playing time to the use of that area? that
Absolutely.
field?
Absolutely. Yeah, all three of our synthetic turf fields, I think, have made a significant difference in terms of players' access to athletic fields
So,
in and following wet weather.
In sort of planning out into the future, is there going to be AstroTurf at Fisher Hill?
No, there are no plans right now for synthetic turf at Fisher Hill.
I see.
And I think that's something that, frankly, with the 3 synthetic turf fields that we had unique partnerships and opportunities that enabled us to leverage town dollars and both private dollars and grants. So we're always looking at opportunities for partnerships and would welcome the opportunity to talk about other athletic fields in the future.
Just because you were answering a question earlier about the comparison between in-house and outside services, I'm wondering, are you also looking at the annual maintenance cost of the synthetic turf compared to the natural?
Yes. Yep. In terms of, I mean, we've looked at that a whole host of ways. We've looked at that in terms of labor hours, and we've looked at them in terms of cost-benefit analysis in both the long term. So in the end, if you look at them over about a 12-year period, given the capital outlay you put at the beginning, you're going to kind of almost net even. But it's just whether you want to be putting the dollars into capital.
So the dollars
costs
come
or
up front
maintenance
as
costs.
opposed to over the period of time?
That's correct.
But you do
Interesting.
have the advantage of being able to play in the spring. when
Well, that's
it's-
what I was asking about,
Yeah.
extends the
That's right.
season,
Yeah.
extends the use of the field. So if the dollars work out more or less the same, you still have the added benefit with the synthetic of longer period of use,
Absolutely.
or fewer down days, I guess I should say. Right. Okay, thank you.
Good. I move that we execute and award contract number PW 15-03 for Skyline Park Maintenance in the amount of $46,500 with D. Musioli Associates. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We now have a question of approving change order number 1 in the amount of $13,800 for work to be completed by Beta Group in connection with the Lower Beacon Street Sewer Separation Project, which I thought we were done with, but
Yeah.
It is done. Actually, this is one of the steps we're taking to finally
I
close
was
the
kind of
project out.
horrified when I saw it in our packet until I read that it was finished.
Okay, this
Okay.
change order is to request an increase of $13,803 to the purchase order that we have with the Beta Group for design services on that sewer separation project. As you may remember, we used to try to forecast a 6-month outlook in what we would need for funding, and in this case for the design services, and we came up $13,000 short. So if you appropriate this, we'll pay the final bill and close that contract out. I might caution the board that this is just for the design services. We still haven't closed out the actual contractor's final payment, which will probably be back before you in 2 weeks.
This money was coming from the MWRA, correct?
It's all the MWRA.
Any question or comment?
Only my regular question about Lower Beacon Street, and that is, I gather that there are, the historic signs that were taken down and lost have still not been found or replaced?
We can't find the one on Beacon Street, so those are gonna be all replaced.
And are we in process to acquire the replacement signage?
We are, and not only are we doing that, but Kevin Johnson is actually putting up historic signs where he has them and they fall into
Out
the
of
historic
the
districts.
store that we have?
Correct.
Right, well, that's very good news.
Yep, we finally found a system that we felt comfortable with.
I know you were worrying about the poles,
Yes.
right? Whether
And
they,
we found a system that I think is gonna work quite well. So we actually tried a pole at the intersection of High and Walnut. So if you take a drive by, it's a black round pole.
I've seen that one.
It actually has a weak spot in the base that if a car hits it.
So if you whack it, it'll fall over.
It'll fall over. So
I'm not sure.
Nobody tested.
This is a little bit weird, but yeah, okay, I'm so glad we have a pole that can be knocked down easily. All right, I'm sure it's much better.
So for my own edification, since this is an MWRA contract or funded contract, they've already paid us the money. We're just sort of outlaying.
that's correct.
Okay.
This money's already in the bank for us.
Good. I move that we approve change order number 1 in the amount of $13,803.57 for work completed by Beta Group in connection with contract number PW 11-13 for the Lower Beacon Street Sewer Separation Project. All those in favor? Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, miscellaneous item O, the question of accepting a check in the amount of $142,918 from Claremont Brookline Suites LLC in connection with improvements to Davis Path and Boylston Street Playground. And this is the matter that Selectman DeWitt was referring to earlier when we talked about our groundbreaking for the new
Hotel.
Oh,
at
good.
the old Red Cab site. It was Galentine.
Well, I probably don't have much to add beyond what Betsy had to say, but there was a nice groundbreaking ceremony today for 111 Boylston Street, and one of the requirements set forth by the Zoning Board of Appeals and upheld by the Planning Board was that 1% of the hard construction costs go towards improvements to the adjacent Davis Path and Boylston Street Playground. And so they actually weren't required to pay that immediately. They could have waited and gotten that, paid that prior to their getting their certificate of occupancy. But they've set that forth, and what I'd like to do is establish an account specifically for improvements to the path and Boylston Street Playground. We will kind of let them do their construction effort and complete that work, and then plan something to complement that appropriately.
I think that's a great idea. Good. Any question or comment? Just add that I'm just thrilled to see this project getting off the ground. And,
Agreed.
and today was a banner day for that. I therefore move that we accept a check in the amount of $142,918 from Claremont Brookline Suites LLC for the purpose of improving Davis Path and all the Boylston Street Playground. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the question of accepting $9,370 from Boston Design Group Developer for the Cleveland Circle project to fund additional services for peer review.
Yes.
Mr. Ditto again.
Busy night. This is a request that we forwarded to the developer and asked him to review the scope of work that the consultant claimed was out of scope and additional work going down the road. The developer looked at it, agreed that it was fair and accurate. He forwarded the town a check in the amount of $9,370. And this is a request that you accept that check so that we can pay some past bills and move on.
Okay. Questions?
Just because I understood, I mean, when I looked at this, I saw that there were some criticisms coming out of the peer review. Have they been resolved, addressed satisfactorily?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just add for everyone's edification that this Cleveland Circle, this is the Cleveland Circle Cinema project, is reaching a new stage as well. We might be at another
Yes,
groundbreaking
yes.
before too long. And because it was approved by the BRA, the Brookline part of the project is now
Moving.
creaking along too. So,
Creaking, right? Moving slowly.
so I would move that we accept $9,370 from Boston Design Group, the developer of the Cleveland Circle Cinema project, to fund additional services for peer review at the site and to execute amendment number 1 with Beta Group, Inc. in connection with those services. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, miscellaneous item Q, question of approving the transfer of appropriations within the police department budget.
Good evening.
Chief O'Leary.
Yes, I'm here to request the transfer of monies, $126,873, from our capital account into our personnel services account. And the reason we have this excess money is when we discussed some of the collective bargaining issues, we thought that it was best to put a little bit of money aside. We refrained from purchasing all of the automobiles that we had been slated to purchase. We purchased 7 marked vehicles, not the 10 that we had appropriated money for, and we held that money back, and we want to look to see if we can put it in personnel services to cover anticipated costs going forward.
Did one of our brand-new vehicles get totaled recently?
It has a lot of damage. We're trying to keep it from getting totaled. It has a very awful lot of damage with very low mileage. It's disappointing to hear, but fortunately, nobody got hurt.
That's good. Any questions or comments from board members? All right. I move then that we approve the appropriation transfer within the police department budget of $126,870 from the automobiles account to the personnel account. All in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair also votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Another appropriations transfer, this time for the town clerk's office, and it's a question of approving and transmitting to the advisory committee the request of town clerk Patrick Ward for appropriation transfers that he'll detail for us.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Town Administrator, I'm requesting a transfer of $6,500 within the appropriation of the FY14 appropriation of the town clerk's office to address some deficiencies that we have in paying our election costs. Historically, we've relied on our SGO5 account, which is the extended polling hours revenue we receive from the Commonwealth biannually. And if the board may recall, I was here before the board last year prior to a reserve fund transfer, one to fund the special state primary and the special state election, but also to address some cost overruns we had in the 2012 presidential election. We zeroed everything out, and we zeroed the SGO5 out, so there's really nothing to fall back on. So we're sort of watching our pennies this fiscal year, and so we can avoid a reserve fund transfer and do a transfer within the appropriation, and that's why I'm here before you this evening.
Appreciate that. Questions or comments? All right, seems pretty straightforward to me. So I move that we approve and transmit to the advisory committee the request of town clerk Patrick Ward for the following appropriations transfers: $5,000 from elections printing services to elections temporary salary, $1,000 from elections wireless account to elections temporary full-time, and $500 from public records office equipment 2 elections, temporary part-time. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Last on our miscellaneous calendar is the question of approving extra work order number 1 in connection with sewer and drain improvements. And Mr. Ditto again.
While we were carrying out this contract, we had discovered that 2 illicit connections that we wanted to take care of right away. One was on Westbourne Terrace and the other was on Boylston Street. When we find these connections, we like to clean them up quite quickly and let EPA know that we're still working on this cross-connection problems. This also was a change order for conditions that we didn't foresee on streets on Rangeley Road and Englewood Ave, which required a little bit more work to complete. This 19,000 represents about 7% of the original contract. The original contract was $262,000. So the 7%'s pretty much within industry standards for change orders.
Okay. So do I understand correctly, then these were residential sewer connections that were actually going into the storm drains?
Correct.
Glad we're getting rid of those.
Yeah, we're doing quite well. They're getting harder and harder to find because we've eliminated so many of them already that we're probably doing about a half a dozen a year.
And is there any case where that would be the homeowner's responsibility to correct that situation?
If it was in the recent past, yes.
Yeah.
Most of these go back to the 20s and 30s.
Good. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? I'm going to move that we approve extra work order number 1 in connection with contract PW 13-14 for sewer and drain improvements by Aquiline Utility. And the extra work order is in the amount of $19,658.99. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. That's it for our miscellaneous calendar. Turning to the full calendar. And by the way, I'll mention that if anyone is here for item number 13, which was to be a discussion of parking meter waiver request, that has been postponed. So the first item we are hearing tonight is police personnel, and it's a question of authorizing the filling of a vacancy in the position of police sergeant. Chief O'Leary.
Good evening again. On June 30th, one of our longtime employees, Paul Kelleher, he announced his retirement, effective that day. Paul, well, actually, he announced his retirement about a week and a half before that. He made his mind up. He wanted to call it a day. He had a really good career. He came on in 1977. He worked in patrol for a little bit more than a year. Was promoted to detective. He stayed in the detective division for about 30 years. When he took an exam for sergeant, got promoted to sergeant, served in patrol as a sergeant in traffic, and then back into patrol most recently. And then he made his decision and he left on that date, and that created a vacancy. As you know, we have 16 sergeants in our ranks. The sergeants are our first line supervisors. We do have a promotional list in effect, and I'm asking authorization to go ahead and fill this vacancy.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I just have to comment, I'm going to miss Sergeant Kelleher, and he was one of your more visible presences in the police department, and I hope he enjoys the retirement.
I think we're all going to miss him. I know that the officers gave him a pretty good send-off, and a lot of emails were exchanged and well wishes, and but he made his decision. He's happy with his decision, and I think he's down the Cape right about now.
Any further from board members? I move that we authorize the filling of a vacancy in the position of police sergeant as described by the chief. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is agenda item number 8, which is the question of authorizing and filling a vacancy in the position of Assistant Recreation Leader in the Recreation Department. Ms. Paradis.
Good evening, Lisa Paradis, Recreation Director. I find myself in a similar position to Chief O'Leary tonight before you. I am here to get authorization to fill the vacancy in the position of Assistant Rec Leader position. It has been vacated by Debbie Notman, who was with the town for 20 years. Actually, she was a town employee for 14 of those 20 years, but ran the recreation soccer program for 20 years. She will be missed in that capacity, and she was a very dedicated, loyal employee to the town. So we are looking to find a replacement for her and fill those big shoes.
Debbie was my boss when I was a soccer coach 2 years ago. Those are big shoes. Any other comments or questions about the filling of this position?
I just have a,
Franco.
is this a full-time position or, it is a full-time position?
Yeah.
Take that back.
40 hours.
I'll just ask that we make sure that when we're advertising for this position, we seek the most diverse possible candidate pool. I hope you'll work with our Human Resources Department in making sure we're making every possible effort to do that.
Absolutely.
And I will move that we authorize the filling of the vacancy in the position of Assistant Recreation Leader in the Recreation Department. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Another vacancy to be filled is item number 9, which is a question of authorizing the filling of a vacancy in the position of Senior Health Inspector in the Health and Human Services Department. Dr. Balsam.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Yes, this is a position that Robin Magner is vacating. Robin, I'm sure most of you know her.
Right, we will miss her.
Yes, she's been with us 17 some odd years. And I think it was a pretty difficult decision for her leaving. You know, she was a shop steward. She did a lot with the town and for the town. But on the other hand, she lives in Braintree, and when a comparable position opened up in the Braintree Department of Public Health, she was recruited and she accepted the position, and will probably save 45 minutes each way on her commute, among other things. So I'm asking for your authorization to replace Robin.
Questions or comments?
I'm just interested in knowing whether you feel that there will be lots of qualified candidates out there when you've had somebody in a position this long sometimes.
Well, I think there will be, and I know right now there's a person who works part-time for us as a senior public health specialist who may be interested, which would be nice.
Yeah, right. Wondered about that. Okay.
I'll add the same comment I made from Ms. Paradis a minute ago. Please make every effort to seek candidates from the most diverse possible pool.
Thank you for...
I'm sure you will. And I'm going to move that we authorize the filling of a vacancy in the position of Senior Public Health Inspector in the Health and Human Services Department. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair also votes aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Alan. Agenda item 10 is the question of approving and transmitting to the advisory committee the request of the Public Building Director, Charlie Simmons, for a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $50,000 for natural gas fuel costs. And Commissioner Bennett is here.
Good evening.
I looked up expecting to see Mr. Simmons.
Thank you. No, he's on vacation. He's on vacation enjoying a beach somewhere on the East Coast. So I am requesting a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $50,000 for our fuel account. We did have an overage to do primarily to the long, cold winter. This increase is consistent with what National Grid had seen in a number of their other customers, so within that range. Last night I appeared in front of the advisory committee, and I requested the same thing, and they had approved that, so I stand before you making that same request.
We're doing anything about locking in for next heating systems?
I
next
believe they
heating season?
did get some lower numbers last year, so for FY15, we did get a little lower contract amount on the.
But it's for the rate, so if you use more
Yeah, this is
BTUs, I
consumption.
guess it is, you're,
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if we're preparing for next year at this point.
Yes, we are. We're all
Already
set
have a
with
rate
that,
for next
yes.
year. Questions or comments? Okay, then I therefore move that we, sorry, I lost my place, approve and transmit to the advisory committee the request of the building department for a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $50,000 for natural gas to cover increased heating costs. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank
Another,
you.
thank you. Another reserve fund transfer request is agenda item 11, and this is the question of approving and transmitting to the advisory committee the request of the Planning and Community Development Director, Allison Steinfeld, for a transfer of $20,000 in connection with the contract for professional administrative support relative to the 40B application at Hancock Village. And further, the question of awarding and executing a contract with Maria Morelli in the amount of $20,000, who is our professional administrative consultant, who's used in connection with that project. Ms. Steinfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am requesting a reserve fund transfer of the amount of $20,000 so that we can continue to engage the services of Maria Morelli, who has provided professional and administrative support in our efforts relative to the 40B application at Hancock Village. By way of a reminder, we were here several months ago requesting successfully a $150,000 reserve fund transfer for consulting services. $75,000 went to town council's office to hire legal counsel on behalf of the ZBA. The other $75,000 went to the planning department. Of that $75,000, I encumbered $25,000 to supplement a grant that we received to engage the services of Edie Netter. Ms. Netter has provided services as a facilitator. I also encumbered $20,000 to hire Maria Morelli. The remaining $30,000 has just been returned to free cash, given that I did not encumber it. So now I am requesting $20,000 to continue Ms. Morelli's contract. The original $20,000 has been exhausted. As you know, we've had 3 extensions already on the 40B application, so we continue to need her services.
Is any of this reimbursable by the developer?
No, the developer expressly pays for peer review. We actually receive checks for that peer review. We've hired Beta Engineering to provide civil engineering, specifically traffic and stormwater services. We've also received another check to hire Tulukian, who's providing urban design peer review. So that's a separate category.
Okay. Yes, Selectman Daley.
I just want to comment to you, Ms. Steinfeld, that I have received several compliments about Ms. Morelli's diligence and efficiency and competence in general.
Thank you very much, and I certainly share that with her. I share your attitude, the attitude toward Ms. Morelli.
Any other further questions or comments?
Just, I guess, what about the other consultants? How are you handling the fact that we're in a new fiscal year? Was money for those services encumbered, or will you be needing additional funding? I'm talking about Ms. Netter and Krokitis and Bluestein. In other words, are they covered under your budget?
Well, Krokitis is hired through town council's office, so
Oh, I see. So that's the town council's office.
In
And
terms
Ms.
of
Netter?
Ms. Netter, we received initially a $15,000 grant which has already been expended. So we've just begun to spend down on the 25,000. So I don't expect that I'll come back to you for
But
additional.
that 25 had been encumbered, so you didn't have to return. I was just trying to
Correct.
figure
It's
out
been
why
encumbered.
these. Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's all.
Right, thank you.
Okay, anything further? I therefore, seeing nothing, I therefore move that we approve and transmit to the advisory committee the request of Ms. Steinfeld, our Planning and Community Development Director, for a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $20,000 in connection with the contract for professional administrative support relative to the 40B application at Hancock Village, and that we also award and execute a contract with Maria Morelli, or authorize the awarding and executing of a contract with Maria Morelli in the amount of $20,000 for professional administrative consulting services in connection with that same project. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. We now have 4 interviews to conduct, and the first one on our agenda is Lynette Glover, and I don't see Lynette here. Is she by any chance out in the lobby? Because I know she called me. There she is. So the first interview is from Lynette Glover, who's a candidate for appointment to our no longer ad hoc Martin Luther King Day Planning Committee. Thank you, Lynette, for coming out and for your service on the ad hoc committee. And why don't you tell us a little bit about why you'd like to be appointed to our permanent committee?
Well, in all my life, I grew up with, in a family where social justice and nonviolence was just paramount. So, when Martin Luther King came along, it was just the most amazing sort of thing for me, because I was permitted to do things with marching and whatnot that my parents would not have permitted any other time. It's sort of you're going to school to learn and to study and not that other stuff. But I was encouraged to, so I've been working as long as I've been in college, and it's just through my whole adult life on issues of social justice. So when Ken approached me about being on the committee when it was ad hoc, I was really thrilled to do so, because I think that observing Martin Luther King Day is certainly a wonderful thing, but it's sort of like singing to the choir. And I want to be involved so that we can certainly continue to do that amazing, wonderful program that we do, but also to just work year-round so that our children are aware of all of the, just more aware of the things that Martin Luther King and others like him worked for and fought for. And I just think it's important. I think that if our children don't have these things instilled within them, and if we as adults aren't reminded and don't find ways to continue to be aware, I just think it makes for not a very good world and not a very good community for us. So I'm hoping to be a part of a group that continues to want to keep our town aware and moving forward in the direction that we have, and maybe even move a little faster and wider. And that's what I'm hoping to be a part of.
By the way, Lynette's the reason we got Liz Walker as our keynote speaker last week.
Yes,
Lynette and Liz are
with
quite
appreciation.
close. Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just, our Human Relations Commission, which I'm hoping that the Attorney General will approve our recent warrant article, and that we'll be reorganizing that a little bit, but I'll assume for a moment that many of the same members will continue on. And they are interested in getting into some educational type programming for the schools and things, and I've thought that might be a good opportunity for a synergy with those of you on the Martin Luther King committee, and it sounds like that's something
I think
you
there is an opportunity for
might be
that.
interested in collaborating on.
For sure.
On some things.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I don't know much about, I know the Human Rights Committee and how,
Yeah.
I know that it's sort of
Well, they're,
need to come
yeah,
together.
they're kind of get reorganized.
But I think our missions are going to very much
Right. For
align.
instance, I know some cities and towns do a lot more for Black History Month than I'm sure there's some things going on in our schools, but, you know, that, I think that could use an infusion of energy and thoughtfulness about.
And I'd like for it to be not just a month.
Yeah.
You know, I think that it's something that needs to be a part of the fabric of how we function, as opposed to 1 month when we, you know, sort of.
Yeah.
But yes.
Well, the other thing I considered that, you know, I think might be of interest to you is that Barbara Brown does a tour of the Underground Railroad sites, the hidden Brookline, and that goes on, you know, when she has a chance to do it. And I think it could be more organized and more regular, and other people participating as well as her, so that there could be a regular kind of.
I think that's one of the things that
thing.
we might be able to do that's ongoing. I'm a real estate broker in town, and every now and then we find a house and we hear these little rumors that, you know, that in the sub basement, this is where people were hidden. And I actually did have the opportunity to sell a house where that did happen, and actually brought some school children with the permission of the owner to there, and that became a lesson right there in itself. So that kind of thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Selectman DeWitt.
I totally think it would be wonderful to talk more in public about the Underground Railroad and Brookline's participation in that. But I also noticed that you said you were part of the Roland Hayes Committee, which is another very important person who's left a legacy in Brookline. And I understand that the idea for the reinvigorated Martin Luther King Committee would be to have more than just the one MLK event. And I would hope something will be developed that also celebrates Roland Hayes.
I know that's been done in town in the past, and I certainly hope, and that would certainly be one of my reasons for wanting to be a part of that committee, would be to develop something that made more people aware. I have a very personal connection to him also with growing up. He actually came to my hometown, and my parents sponsored his coming.
Oh, that's great.
And it was just an experience that I'll never forget. So, but yeah, so I think.
And also connected to a house in Brookline, in a way.
Yeah, I actually sold his house.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, there are just so many opportunities. And I certainly see the MLK Committee and the Roland Hayes Committee having very similar, you know, sort of being partners going down the road. And that just makes the whole, you know, because it's a very similar mission and goal, and you know, that I think needs to be enhanced and
Well, it's
worked
great
on.
that you're
Yeah.
a bridge link between the two.
Well, I hope I can be.
Thank you.
And that's got a lot of bridges and a lot of connections to the civil rights movement as well, which I'm sure we'll be hearing
Right.
more about in the future. Anything else further from Lynette? Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you. I was happy to come.
Go back to work.
Yes, yes, sir.
Next is interviews Elizabeth Childs, who is seeking appointment to the Norfolk County Advisory Board. Good evening, Elizabeth. Hello. I gotta tell you, I'm so glad that I approached you about applying for this, because I got to read your resume. I had no idea just how extensive and impressive it was.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you so much for considering me for this position. I'd be honored to serve Brookline in this role. And as you know, our county is the county of presidents. We have a claim to fame. 4 presidents were born in Norfolk County: John Adams, John Quincy Adams, John F. Kennedy, and George Herbert Walker Bush. So we have a legacy of providing leadership to the country here. And we're one of 28 municipalities. Brookline is the largest contributor in terms of tax revenue, because we have the tax revenues are weighted based on allocation of property values, and ours is about 13%. Ours is 13%. So we contribute the most. And the reason I want to serve is I believe that the taxpayers and the people of Brookline should be getting a fair return for their dollars here. And there's no better way to make sure we get that than to have clear transparency and an understanding about what the county does for us and what they really should and could do better for us. And I'd be honored to attend the meetings and report back to you with recommendations for how we might better utilize the county services. I also am no shrinking violet, and I am happy to speak at the county board about the importance of making sure that we do get a fair return on our dollars. There are a couple risks that we are facing with the allocation issues and the dollars at the county, and I think you should know about them. The first one is the FEMA map, flooding map. I don't know if you're aware of the implication of that for the allocation of property values, but it is significant. 14,000 homes in Quincy are affected by the new FEMA map, which will require them to increase their flood insurance, which changes the affordability index of their houses. So their property values will be going down. So Quincy is the second most highly valued municipality, it's a city actually, in Norfolk County. We do not yet know the implication of that for the funding weighting in the county, but I really do believe we should keep our finger on that piece of information. It's being rolled out now, and this is just the first wave of it. The only people who are really aware of it are homeowners who are directly affected. Homeowners who've had flood insurance of $1,200 a year are now facing flood insurance of $7,500 a year. So you can imagine what that does to the value of their home on resale. The second issue is the workers' comp case that has potential $3 million liability exposure for the county, and it's not clear yet how that's going to be covered. So those are two risks that we really have to be aware of and stay on top of.
Selectman Daley.
Well, you certainly did your homework. Very impressive. But I've got to say, I am among those who feel that the agricultural school, which seems to be a wonderful place from all accounts I've heard, should be taken over by the state. I think most of the students are not Norfolk County residents. Certainly, very, very few from Brookline have gone there. Right. And yet, that organization, that institution is taking on debt right. that you know, we are liable for. And I really think it's a kind of unfair burden on this county and Brookline in particular.
I couldn't agree more, Selectwoman Daley, about the importance of making sure that Norfolk Aggie does not drain the taxpayers' dollars and our county the dollars we send to the county. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know enough about the Norfolk Aggie particulars to be able to give you a firm suggestion, but I think your initial proposal about that maybe it doesn't belong in the county is a very good starting point. And I think that's true with almost every county service. We really should ask, what does the county need to do and what do they do well? And what efficiencies do we get about it being done at a county level that can't be gained anywhere else? And maybe Norfolk Aggie is an example of it's not the most efficient place to administer that program. That might very well be the case. But we can't know that until we see, at least maybe you do know, but I don't know yet, until we see how the balance sheet really looks for that kind of a program. And I think there's a tendency at the county to dump all of the dollars into buckets rather than giving clear balance sheets so that we can make some really good decisions about where we should prioritize our spending.
Good. Selectman Waschinsky.
As you know, town meeting has voted at least once, I want to say twice.
Twice, I think.
To, I don't know if secede is the right word. So, and we've heard, and I think the likelihood of that getting through the state legislature is not very good, to say the least.
But it would send a message.
Right. So, town meeting has sent the message that, we're not happy with Norfolk County, and I would hope that if you were appointed as our rep, that you go in with that knowledge and can represent that point of view.
Yes, I actually participated in one of those votes, and I completely agree that there is no reason for us to be sending $750,000 of our tax receipts to a county if that doesn't benefit the townspeople of Brookline.
So I completely agree.
You should also be aware there are actually 3 separate legislative efforts going on right now that have so far not got the proper traction on Beacon Hill. It is on a hill, so it can be difficult getting traction, but 3 separate legislative efforts that would, in varying degrees, alleviate the situation, but you'll get up to speed with those
Yeah.
quickly if you're not already.
I have a lot to learn before to really do a good job for you on this.
I heard from Dan Matthews, our county administrator, today. I know you've already been in touch with him.
I reached out to him, yes.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ms. Childs?
Just one, and that is, given that we're on public record as being interested in seceding, how about dissolving it? Just put it out of its misery.
I think that has been done, actually.
Oh, in
Yes,
western
yes,
part of the
and-
Commonwealth,
and
sure.
so there is a precedent to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that that's not out of the question. I think that, the best ammunition we have is to have clear ways of saying that the dollars that are being spent at the county government are not bringing benefit to the people who are paying those taxes.
Well, the
So-
way the other counties got dissolved was you have to push Norfolk into bankruptcy, apparently.
Well, then maybe we should withhold our contribution.
We can.
I don't know that
Just take it right out.
I mean, as you know, the budget for Norfolk County is about $27 million, and much of that is from tax revenues, but the county also collects a tremendous number of dollars from fees, court fees and deeds. And the school. So there is tremendous pressure to not relinquish any aspect of revenue generation from the county. But that, I think, the clearer we get and the more transparent we are with those balance sheets, the better arguments we can make.
The reality that you need to be aware of is, and I think you know, I have been the...
You have been there, done that.
Is that we are just about a lone wolf. We are a lone wolf, but we're a lone voice in the wilderness.
Lone voice in the wilderness, right.
The other municipalities in Norfolk County benefit for the same reasons that we are, that we're disbenefited, that we're burdened by this. They're benefiting from this. And there's a couple of other communities that are closer to our position and have listened to the arguments, but very little empathy from the majority of Norfolk County communities, one of whom you mentioned in your comments.
I can assure you I would do my very best to build alliances with communities within the county that see it like we do. And it takes that kind of an alliance and coalition on a board like this to start to make the needle move. So I'm willing to do that as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Joshua Safer, candidate for reappointment to the Transportation Board. Dr. Safer, good to see you.
Folks, it's a pleasure.
Tell us why you want to continue your service or indentured servitude.
Well, basically, it's been really a pleasure being on the Transportation Board.
Why are we laughing?
He does think that way.
It's true. It's kind of helping navigate the public way for everybody and trying to make us all get along. I think I was up here before only about 2 years ago because I think I was reappointed late last time. I feel like I was just here. But in any case, I talked then about minimizing conflict and trying to bend over backwards to be as transparent as possible so people would feel trusting of us, and then also balancing the data-driven opinions on the board with being more neighborhood sensitive. And so those have been kind of my mantras, and I think I'm reasonably effective in that regard. And so I actually enjoy playing that role, especially that latter role. We want to always do the right thing based on what the data show, but an enormous aspect of this is I kind of think of Brookline as a condominium, and We're all kind of, and what we do on the transportation board is discuss how to maintain the hallways and the stairs. And so sometimes there's a right way of doing things. And in fact, often there's a technically right way of doing things, and sometimes there's the way we choose to do anyway, even if it's not technically correct. And so that's another piece of what I enjoy in terms of balancing all of that. In terms of what's actually happened since I was last here, on the subject of motor vehicles, I can't actually, I kind of categorized it by 4 modes of transit. Motor vehicles, I can't come up with any dramatic changes, just steady improvements in some things like getting more of those meters that actually take credit cards. And I think we're going to continue in that direction. We have upcoming projects at Coolidge Corner again, but very, very poorly funded. So I don't know that we'll learn huge amounts, but we'll do what we can. That's the Green Street traffic signal money. As well, some traffic calming over on Heath Street now that Wegmans actually is in place, and we finally have all the inputs. On public transit, the big change is that PTAC, the Public Transportation Advisory Committee, is actually meeting again regularly, and they kind of quasi-disbanded after the Route 66 project, but they're back together. Looking at some South Brookline routes and modifying things with the Green Line. And a side benefit of the fact that they're back together is that they're actually talking to the MBTA. We have an actual group that meets regularly and talks to the MBTA. So a somewhat random suggestion that came out of one of those meetings was letting people with Charlie cards transfer among Green Lines on the surface. And so that apparently is likely to happen. Let's say being able to go to the end of the line on the C and then switch over to the D, things like that.
Wow.
So apparently the MBTA has no issue with it. Nobody brought it up. It's that kind of thing. And so the fact that this committee meets regularly was helpful. Bikes, we've just continued again incrementally. I was very impressed at town meeting that there were 2 bicycle projects that came up, and it basically they've gone the way of every other funding thing in town meeting where there's essentially no controversy. It just you go down the list. Maybe one person has a comment. So quite, just an evolution in that direction. And in terms of bike improvements, we now have bike accommodations as far south as the farm. We don't get quite to Putnam Circle yet, or the golf course, or over to Skyline, but we're down to the farm at least. And I see people using that a huge amount, and it is really pulling people out onto their bikes. I'm impressed. The numbers are up. My neighbors even comment on it. So I have neighbors who've started biking to work who are not athletic. And finally, with pedestrians, I think we finessed well the discussion about having a group who would advocate on pedestrian issues, and there was talk even of a pedestrian advisory committee. And I think the issue really was who would bother to meet regularly and take the time, and it's not any actual opposition to the concept. And I think BCAN has really fallen into that role, at least de facto, and so that's been good in terms of pushing forward some of the issues, focusing, of course, on the older population, but those kinds of pedestrian benefits are good for us all, and so that I think has been a good thing that's appeared in the couple of years since I was before you last.
Questions for Dr.
Actually,
Sig? Go ahead.
I just want to follow up on the pedestrian question, because the BCAN folks and others actually are very interested in the complete streets concept and notion. And I've certainly been approached, and I suspect my colleagues have as well, that we create another committee. And I thought, let's stop and think about this for a minute. You just listed most of the components of complete streets. You didn't talk about what might be kind of a DPW function, which I would call streetscape. But most of the other items you mentioned are parts of a complete streets concept. And so I guess I'm asking you how you might, or what your thoughts are on how we might constructively pursue that notion without creating a whole new structure of something, or maybe, I don't know, maybe the way it happens is that we bring together, as we often do, one from Group A, one from Group B, and one from Group C, but, you know, just be interested in what you think about that.
That's actually where my head is at as well, which is more of an ad hoc approach and trying to make use of the people who are already meeting. I think this is exactly the example I was giving with using BCAN de facto as a pedestrian
Right.
advocacy group instead of coming up with a new committee and struggling then to find members and people who would actually take the time when half the people who were interested in that committee are on BCAN anyway. And so some of my thought here is to go back to BCAN, frankly, and say, why don't you lead us, and let's see how that goes. And if it gets too big and we need a committee, that's a different story. But in the meantime, my fear is just finding enough volunteers. That's really the only negative. Otherwise, the more
Actually, my
voices
fear
the
was
merrier.
you'd have too many volunteers, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, if there was some way they would like to sort of formalize, or somewhat formalize that expectation from them, I'm sure the Board of Selectmen would welcome that.
You're saying in terms of a complete streets, a formal complete streets committee?
Well, let BCAN know that the town administration and the leadership are depending on them for that leadership.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And I give them the same feedback from the Transportation Board too, which is we're looking at them essentially as this as a de facto committee on these subjects. And again, the complete streets thing, I can't comment in more than
that's
what I
okay.
just said. It's all theoretical.
Right.
The specific is not to do the pedestrian advocacy committee for lack of more people than who are on
Right.
BCAN already.
But literally, what you just described within the umbrella of the Transportation Board tends to cover many of the elements that would be discussed, except perhaps specifically pedestrian and what I call streetscape, but they're already on your plate.
Yep.
Under your
Yep.
umbrella, or wherever
Well,
you want to put them.
The last conversation that I had was asking us to sign on to that and have a designated individual who would, or a designated individual who would go to their meeting in the spring. and
Represent,
actually-
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I forgot who actually went, but and my response to that is entirely positive, with okay, and give us thoughts on what
So,
you're proposing.
but
'cause
you
we're all
would,
pretty-
you would be supportive of some, let's call it grouping, I'm being careful here, or facilitation of thinking more about that notion concept?
Certainly, if there are people who want to do it. My
Okay.
caveat is exclusively, don't come to me with an idea and say, can you find 6 people who are willing to execute this? But if I've got 6 people who say, we'd like to come up with ideas, I'd
Right.
say, oh, lovely, volunteers are always welcome.
Okay.
Selectman Daley.
Well, first, I'll start with the compliment, Josh. I first get far fewer complaints about the Transportation Board than I used to hear. But also, in general, I think there's a sense that it's much easier to find out what you guys are doing and to make contact with the Transportation Board than it used to be. And so that's very good.
Thank you.
I serve on the Council on Aging, though, and I'm also on the Age-Friendly City Committee and whatever, and I do hear some frustration of your reluctance to appoint that. I hear about plenty of people who want to be on either a pedestrian or Complete Streets Committee, and of some frustration that they're not getting appointed, but.
If, honestly, as a practical matter, if specific people send them my way,
Okay.
because the limit was what I said, honestly, which was, just exactly what I was saying to Betsy. Don't come to me and say, I have this committee should exist, but I don't really want to be on it. If there are people who want to be in a recognized, these are ideas factories essentially, and so therefore they're great. And if they're advocating for a certain position, that's just fine actually, because they're thinking about things. And we on the Transportation Board have a limited amount of time that we can think about things, and so the more people work out these ideas and bring them a little more processed, the better, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would think that sort of the way we operate, you might ask one member of your board to head up these subcommittees. Doesn't have to be the same member, but.
Yeah, so, so that's exactly what I don't want to do.
Okay.
Because, so the board already has what, is stretched in whatever directions they're stretched. And so asking somebody on the board to actually organize this extra thing,
Mr. Englander is a big supporter of complete streets.
Look, again, I'm coming back to, yes, so if he wants to do it, I would never say no, but it's the reverse that I don't want to get into. That's really what I'm saying.
Well, just to follow up, but on a really specifically more technical approach to this, I can imagine, for example, that it would be, again, ad hoc and volunteers, people who wanted to do it, and maybe Scott's the right transportation board member, but you were sort of suggesting that BCAN might take leadership. And part of the reason I asked you the question is that when I thought about it, I saw transportation being kind of the housing for something like this, whether or not it was transportation board initiated, directed, as opposed to something sort of on the outside. And you don't have to answer this question if you don't feel like you have the answer, but that's really, how do we do this in a way that's not duplicative, not redundant, and at the same time gives voice to something that sounds like it'd be an interesting thing to, understand better.
Yeah, your point is taken, and I would say I think we'd be very happy to play that role, and even when I talk about BCAN serving as the de facto pedestrian advocacy group, that still, even though BCAN doesn't work under us as an organization, for that niche role, they essentially do, because they bring thoughts to us, not too differently, frankly, the way the formal Bicycle Advisory Committee and PTAC do. And so so that dynamic.
But you guys already have streets, right? Mm-hmm. And they would bring sidewalks, so to speak. Anyway.
Yeah, so I would be very open to that, is I guess the bottom line.
Selectman Waschinsky.
I'd like to talk about two things. One is something I don't think the town does very well, and that's traffic signal coordination. And there are some parts of town where the traffic signals have been redone, say Beacon Street, so there's infrastructure to do traffic signal coordination, but we've never really gotten it right. The traffic signal at Hawes Street, for example, just gets my craw, and I always get stuck at that. And then there are other places where we're going to be fixing, say at High and Route 9, and there's a traffic signal there. It's a very complicated intersection with the fire station, and if the fire engine goes out, it's 10 minutes. The signals are screwed up. And that's a very old controller, and so I get it. But what are your thoughts about traffic signal coordination, and is it something that the transportation board can pay attention to?
So yeah, this is actually a pet peeve of mine too, and we're pretty weak on this subject. And I come from some of you may know I'm from Wisconsin. And this would be a subject where, when I moved here, which is almost 20 years ago, Wisconsin had already been ahead of where we are for my entire lifetime, since like the 1960s and 70s. So, yeah, it's, so to the specifics, so I would be in favor, because I know the technology is out there, because I lived it my whole childhood life, and a piece of my adult life before I moved out here. On Route 9, the state owns most of that infrastructure, and they may consult us and they may not, and that's a problem. And on Beacon Street, all that money and that beautiful new construction project, still, in my view, they did the wrong thing, and that they actually only have infrastructure around Coolidge Corner. So each cluster of a handful of signals talks to each other, but not the others. So there's actually, so instead of making all of Beacon Street one thing, and again, it's crazy, right? I mean, think about Manhattan, where, you know, an entire avenue for miles talks
Right,
to.
you go 30 miles an hour and you go straight through.
Yes, and that's ancient technology, I mean, that's 50-year-old technology. But nonetheless, that was not done in Beacon Street. And so there are actually 3 little clusters. There's a cluster that goes from about St. Mary's to the beginning of Coolidge Corner. Then there's most of Coolidge Corner. And then there's another kind of a Washington Square-ish cluster. And they don't talk to each other. And so we could, and even then, we're still not optimized to the degree we could be, so we could probably do a better job. And I think that's some of the Coolidge Corner piece was waiting for this little Green Street intersection money to see if there's some fine tuning that we can be, that could be explained to us. But even when that's done, there's still that disconnect. And Boston metro area in general is bad in that regard. And the way City of Boston handles it is they actually have cameras at intersections, and there's a person sitting at control who plays with the lights in order to compensate for the fact that they don't actually talk to each other. There's a human back at maybe there are more than one human, but there's a control room, which we obviously don't have for Brookline. So, but again, that's anyway. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's kind of the status of that one.
This is like the old department stores where there used to be the detective inside the column, you know, and you look in the mirror and you'd actually be looking at the detective who was inside the column watching people.
Right. So with that massive caveat, I'm in enormous agreement with you. And so a lot of that is a practical matter for our public works is tweaking kind of the system that we have.
Right.
But can I just follow up quickly? But wouldn't we, at the time of Coolidge Corner, had the technology? Why didn't we do it?
I don't know.
I mean, it was there.
This predates my being on
Yeah,
the board. So
right.
I don't actually know. Remember, the state put this in.
Right.
And we have other gripes with
So
the state.
maybe it was the state that.
Yeah, we have other gripes. You know, why does the bike lane end?
Well,
and
I
why
know
are
Andy
we saddled with that one?
Pepper-Sturgeon's
Yeah.
promises me that when Brookline Place goes forward and the Gateway East project is implemented, they're gonna fix it, but I don't know.
Right, it's an opportunity to be smarter, and whether, you know, at different years, our abutters and our, that is Newton and City of
Yeah,
Boston,
right.
and the state listen to us more and less. Right now, our relationships are pretty good, so that makes me cautiously optimistic that we can say, guys, do this.
Changing directions, a number of people have talked to me about bike tracks to enhance protection of bike lanes. And I know we're constrained in many, if not most areas due to real estate, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you said it exactly. So in a perfect world, that's obviously the best, right? And our constraint is real estate and cash. So sometimes it's a matter of money, but it's more real estate than cash, frankly. If we can squeeze them in, it certainly sounds attractive. So I know we've been talking about that at the kind of the Gateway East area for a little bit there. And to the degree that we can do that it makes sense, that we can fit the pieces in, I would say that certainly the Transportation Board, I think I can speak for six of us, will be supportive of anything that we can get to fit in a practical way.
Okay. Anything else for Dr. Safer?
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you for your
thank you.
time and for all your dedicated service to
Well, thank you guys. You work harder than I do.
Chris Hussey, candidate for reappointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals, another indentured servant to the town. Good evening, Chris. Nice
Good
to see
evening,
you.
ladies and gentlemen of the board.
Tell us what you've been up to, as if we didn't
Well,
know.
let's see. It's been 5 years since I've been on the board. As most of you know, there are 6 of us, 3 members and 3 associate members. 5 lawyers and 1 architect, and that's me, which brings me to a request to the board. We have 2 vacancies in the associate membership, and if at all possible, I'd love to have another architect on board. Not only some redundancy, but also, I hate to admit it, but getting a little long in the tooth. In a year and a half, I'm going to be 80. My health is good, and the synapses are still working, but I think there's got to be a backup somehow.
Looks good too, Chris.
So,
You don't look a day over 70.
I have people who say I don't look a day over 80. Anyway, it's a good board. I think the planning board, the planning board, and the lawyers have done a lot of work sort of getting the neighbors and the applicants to work together to solve problems before they get to the board. And the staff, I want to commend as well, both the planning board staff and the building department that give us reports and what have you. So it's been a good 5 years. As some of you know, for some decades before being on the board, I was on the other side of the bar, presenting to the board, as Ken knows, going back quite a ways. So I think questions be the appropriate thing to do now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions?
No, all I can do is commend him for his, probably unfairly characterized, but not penal servitude. We do appreciate it, and I know that you have to sit on more, I guess, cases, because the bylaw says there needs to be 1 architect builder, and you're the only one. So I am very sympathetic to your request, not only to find you a colleague, but also maybe someone who can follow in your footsteps.
Thank you.
We should take that very seriously.
I just want to say I'm very grateful of your willingness to do this. And if you have any suggestions of people we might approach, we'd certainly follow up on them.
I think it's probably not appropriate for me to say names in public at this point, but
Right,
if somebody
yeah.
would like to get in touch with me later on, I can come up with a couple of names, I think.
Okay.
Very good.
We haven't had a lot of applicants, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, what?
Well, and I
We
hate
haven't
to,
had a lot of applicants, so, new
I know.
applicants, so
I know, architects are pretty busy.
have to beat the bushes a little bit.
But there are quite a few architects in Brookline. One of the possibilities is to advertise in the Boston Society of Architects magazine. Actually, they're just online now rather than having a physical magazine. But I've seen advertisements for other boards and commissions coming through their communications, and that would be one way to try and flush somebody out.
well, maybe we could even, when we next post, what we do in the tab, say, need a few good architects, and see if one would come forward.
Yep.
Good.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
Getting down to the end here. I'll reiterate that agenda item number 13, the proposal to waive parking meters fees for a day has been withdrawn and may or may not come back to us. Next is warrant, the question of calling the fall 2014 special town meeting and setting opening and closing dates for the warrant. Mr. Cronin.
Very quickly, Tuesday, November 18th would be the first night of town meeting. Would have the warrant open on August 7th, which is a Thursday, and close just about a month after that on September 4th, which is also a Thursday. One thing to note for this board, kind of a scheduling quirk, Veterans Day is on a Tuesday this year, November 11th, so you obviously wouldn't be meeting on that day. So unless you're willing to meet on another day that week, there's a chance that the last opportunity you have as a board to vote on any warrant articles would be November 4th, which would mean you wouldn't have an opportunity to get anything out in any supplemental mailing. So it might be problematic. So you might want to, in terms of a long-term calendar, think of a meeting on the 13th or 14th of November.
That's good thinking ahead. Thank you, Sean. We will do that. Any questions or comments about the?
Labor Day this year, is that on the
Very
first?
early, it's the first.
Okay, so the closing of the warrant is after Labor Day.
Yeah, which is It always works out, well, almost always works out that way, yeah.
Right.
Yep, a couple days after, yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, seeing no further comments, I'm going to move that we set the special town meeting for fall 2014 to be held on November 18th, that the warrant will open on August 7th and close on September 4th, and combined reports printed the weekend of October 31st. Any other part of that motion I need to make? No? All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next, we'd like to take up agenda item 15, which is the question of making appointments to the Martin Luther King Committee. We interviewed Ms. Glover earlier, and I'll turn the matter over to Mr. Kleckner for proposing a slate of candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in this case, there is no limit on the number of candidates or membership on the committee, so I would just propose the entire slate of candidates that is before you on page 15-1 of our attachments or materials. So all those in favor of the slate as appears, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Impressive group.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
it
are
is.
great, and they're a hard-working group, and I'm looking forward to our newly invigorated Martin Luther King Committee. And that brings us to our last agenda item. This is, Mr. Kleckner and I went through the list of selectmen duties and committees that the selectmen should be serving on. Obviously, there's been some change due to Selectman Banker no longer being a selectman, and some other things which have happened just sort of over by attrition over the years. So did the best we could, making the list of appointments that needed to be made. We put out a proposed list of based on just instinct on who best qualifies and best has shown an interest in that particular committee, which you've all had a chance to review. And to be honest with you, some of these are appointments by the chairman, and some of them are votes of the Board of Selectmen. What I'm going to do as a way of shortcutting this is make them all. I'll make the nominations for them, and then I'll make them all Board of Selectmen appointments in this case. I think it's the most efficient way to handle it. So the nominations I'd like to make, and this is open for discussion if anyone has any other ideas, is that the Audit Committee would be Selectman Daley, the Cable Licensing Access Television Committee would be, our appointee would be Selectman Waschinsky, the CDBG Funding Committee would continue to be Selectman Daley, the Climate Action Committee would be Selectman Waschinsky, the Committee for the Disabled would be Selectman Franco, the Council on Aging would be continue to be Selectman Daley. I would be the representative to the Labor Advisory Board and the MLK Committee, which I've been shepherding through this process. That the Town School Partnership Committee, which is supposed to be chaired by the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and Selectman DeWitt, I would hope would join me in as the other selectman representative to that. And that I would also rejoin the Zoning Bylaw Committee, which I was a member of 5 years ago, and would rejoin. As I said, I'm open to suggestion on just about any of these, but those are my nominations. Any discussion, comment?
I believe historically, we've had 2 members on Labor Advisory.
2 members on Labor Advisory, so that I didn't know.
It seems to me,
Because you and I were on.
yeah, Nancy and I served together, and it's usually been sort of the,
I'll be happy to help.
Okay, so I certainly don't mind having an extra brain on that one. So everybody okay with Selectman Waschinsky joining me as co-representative to the Labor
I think he's well
Advisory?
qualified.
Absolutely. Any other comments, questions? All right. Then I'm going to move that we, I've made the nominations, and I move that we appoint the selectmen to the committees that I just listed, and as described in our actually, it's not in our agenda material, so I am going to say it one more time since it's not in our materials. The Audit Committee, Selectman Daley. The Cable Licensing Access Television Committee, Selectman Waschinsky. The CDBG Funding Committee, Selectman Daley. The Climate Action Committee, Selectman Waschinsky. The Commission for the Disabled, Selectman Franco. The Council on Aging, Selectman Daley. The Labor Advisory Board, Selectman Goldstein and Selectman Waschinsky. The MLK Committee, Selectman Goldstein. The Town School Partnership Committee, Selectman Goldstein and Selectman DeWitt. And the Zoning Bylaw Committee, Selectman Goldstein. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley.
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt.
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And that concludes our business for tonight, Tuesday, July 8th. There is no meeting next Tuesday night, so everybody enjoy your week off. Good evening.